Welcome everybody. My name is Francesco and I'm going to be talking about JavaScript today. How many of you guys is familiar with JavaScript? Yes, exactly. That's why you're here. So again, this is going to be a series of workshops, lessons where we're going to be looking at different things. First of all, we're going to learn language, and then we're going to see a little web developing, like actual web developing, which is going to implement HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build a website. And then we're going to see how that website, what the user sees, interacts with what the machine does, the server does. So we're going to see how to create and deploy a server. Yeah. Oh, that's true. God damn it. Yeah, this one. Okay, cool. Okay. Got it. So as I was saying, we're going to be looking at three different things: how to create a website first, and then how to deploy and create a server, how to create and deploy a server. And then from there, I wanted to kind of like go off topic a little bit and show you guys how to use the same language, so JavaScript, to create iOS and Android apps. There's actually a framework called React Native that allows you to code the same app using the same language. So that's going to be another thing that we're going to be doing. So the first thing that we're going to be learning today, I'm going to do a short presentation, and then we're going to actually get into work. Variables are just things where you, as Armand said earlier, you assign something that could be a number, a string, and whatever you want. So in JavaScript, a variable can be anything, meaning that we use this syntax, var a, to define something that could be a number, that could be a string. So everything is a var. Even a function could be a var. We'll go through that later. Another thing that we can do with these variables now is use operators such as plus, minus, everything that you can do with Python in terms of math, basic math at least, you can do it in JavaScript. The approach in math in JavaScript is relatively smaller than the one in Python if we have to compare the two languages, as well as C++ for whoever has a basic knowledge in that language. Another thing that we're going to be learning today is conditions, so if-else statements, meaning if this something is true, do something else, do something else. So it could be either true or false. Then we're going to pass into objects. Objects are something that are very similar to what Armand was talking about earlier, and they're related with dictionaries. But they're kind of different because they're considered to be objects and not like arrays of numbers or strings or something similar to that. So we can have many parameters, and we just have to understand how to access them and modify them. Then there are some cool stuff that are related to how JavaScript works and how it interacts with web. So the first thing that we're going to be seeing today is going to be alarms. Alarms are a way to get an output from the browser. So for instance, let's say that a user wasn't able to access the server. Fine, I send an alarm in return. And so the browser is going to show the user that that's not possible. And then we're going to be looking at dates. So what's the date today, and blah, blah, blah. So JavaScript always knows what time it is, and there is a syntax to do it. So generally speaking, we're going to be learning about 4 different things: variables, conditions, objects, and cool stuff. Okay. Before going into the next lecture, let's get into work and look at what we can do. So as I said, the way we define stuff is the following. So this is a variable, and in here I am assigning it to a number. In C++, for whoever is familiar with it, it would be something like this. Now, this is because a is considered to be an integer, and then compiler thinks that that's an integer, and so it computes it in a different way rather than a string. JavaScript doesn't care about this. In fact, we could assign this to a floating point number, which would be different in C++, or to a string. Okay? So the same way it compiles with Python, we can console log something out, meaning see out something out, output something to the console. So if I wanted to console log A, that could work. Now, in this regards, we can also work with operators, as I said before. So for instance, let's say that we have another variable that is called TechLab with a space in it. And then I sum the two variables. It's going to say hello TechLab. So we can sum strings up. We can sum, of course, numbers. In the case of numbers, it would actually do the mathematical operation. So if this was a floating point number, and this was another one, like this one, it would compute something else out. So we actually do the mathematical operation for that. In this case, we're using just two variables, but of course we can use as many variables as we want, and we can multiply a string and a number together. We can do any sort of mathematical operations that can involve different types of variables, although we're defining them in the same way. They're called var. Okay, so then, yes?
What is undefined mean?
Undefined is just, so this is compiling on Node.js. If you work with Node.js, which is a framework that we're going to be looking at that is related to JavaScript, every time it compiles, it says undefined, but it doesn't actually influence the code in this case. Okay. Now, let's say that we have something, let's say we have a person, right? And we want to define this person with different categories. So this person is, and I'm going to create an object in this case, has a name, and guess what? It's named Armin. And then, is Armin cool? Do you think that Armin is cool? I think he is, so I'm going to say that he's going to have a property that is going to be true. Now, in this case, I can use a condition to output something different. Let's say if person, in this case Armin, is cool, I'm going to console log, and so output to the console, person dot name plus another string. So in here I am adding two strings, which is person name, which is part of the object person. So name is just a parameter of person, with another string which is cool. And so if Armin wasn't, I would just, but he is, and we know it. Is not cool. So in this case, he is cool. Sorry, I missed a space. In this case, he is cool because the variable is true. But if I wanted to, just if I wanted to, Armin is not cool. Okay. Whatever. Now let's get into like the stuff that I consider more like specific to JavaScript itself as a language. Let's say that I wanted to use the browser to display that rather than the console. 99.9% of the times, you're not going to see like a rejection of like a login on the console, because that way the user would never see it. What you would see is a modal or an alarm in this case that will show a message to the user that is using that specific web app. So in this case, I would say alarm. So just alarm. I don't have to include any library because it's included in JavaScript itself. Oops. Hold on. Okay. Alert. Sorry. My English And so in this case, I see an actual message. Now, this thing is very important because it changes depending on which browser you're using. Hello. I'm using Chrome, which is probably the best one when it comes to web developing because it's a standard and Google is always like gigantic when it comes to web developing. But on Firefox or on Internet Explorer, it's going to display differently. So this is an alarm. This is something that the user would see. So let's say that rather than a person, I would want to show the date, the current date, right? So I will create a new variable that is called date. And this variable gets basically a value that is this started from the 1970 because that was the standard, and then it got up to here. So that's actually a number that gets translated by the JavaScript compiler into an actual date. So let's make this a little cooler and say today, comma, plus date plus person name is cool. I will add a little space in here just to make it a little bit more readable. And I will copy that in here. So I can see today is the day and I am using this. Why am I showing you dates? Because when it comes to servers, it's really important to keep track of time. Meaning, let's say that for instance, I developed an app for my roommates to take the trash out. So every 20, because we would never take the trash out, so we needed a system to make that more efficient. So I created it. And the idea was that every 24 hours, the person would change so that in the eventuality in which we would see something in the trash, that person was in charge of that. And so I made use of that to keep track of time so that if it was something different than 16, then I would change it. This library is actually pretty cool in the sense that, okay, right now you're seeing this, but you're probably wondering, how can I access that? And the answer is that there's a complete library that allows you to get different, this is actually the Mozilla standard. So for instance, in here, they're just showing the name of the month and the actual day, and in here, they're just showing the year. So they're actually creating a variable date in which it holds the value of 1995, meaning that if you're working with, say, records and you want to assign that to a specific year, then you're going to be using that. Yeah, that's it. Now, I know that this is probably already maybe not a lot of information, but you want to kind of get the gist of it. So what I did was I created a little wiki that you can access here, or first of all, let's look at what we're going to be doing next time in terms of lecture and lecture. So first of all, we're going to be looking at functions and arrays. I understand that he kind of went a little bit forward than me, and I wanted to take a step back because I feel like JavaScript is so simple that sometimes it can get confusing, meaning that you're going to see errors that don't make sense, in the sense that it's not mathematical. If you look at a language like C++, then it will become very specific and very consistent. With JavaScript, since it's always updating, you never know. In the sense that, for instance, right now, they no longer use it. Use this definition to declare a variable, but they use let. Which is more of a different definition, meaning that it does different things depending on which scope it's in. I mean, it's really complicated to get into the latest version of JavaScript and stay updated in it. So just as a standard, we're going to be using JavaScript and not ES6. So if you look online, you're going to see a lot of tutorials in ES6, which is actually the new version of JavaScript, but we're not going to be using that for this series of workshops. So going back to the topics that I'm going to cover in the next workshop, functions and arrays, so basic ideas to have our project better structured and have groups of numbers, because that's what arrays are. And then we're going to be looking at basic HTML. Many people think that HTML, which is the language of the web, is an actual language. HTML is not really a language. It's just a series of tags that we use to refer to objects that can be clickable, that can be interactable. So it works kind of differently, in my opinion. Now, since I wanted this to be a more like interactive workshop, we could like work on a project right now. And my idea was to do a Fahrenheit to Celsius converter, which I think you guys have all the tools to create. And I understand that there might be a general confusion about the language because you just saw Python, which is a completely different language and probably a way more complicated one rather than JavaScript. So I created a wiki that y'all can use. And you can just scan the QR code and you're gonna be in, like with your phone or something, and you're gonna see the wiki itself, which was the one that I showed you earlier, where you can actually like play with the browser. So let's say that like I want to change the value of this variable. I'm gonna say 6, and then I'm gonna run the snippet, and I'm gonna see like the program change itself while I'm working. So using these tools, try to create this Fahrenheit to Celsius converter. We still have like an hour, and Kody wanted to do his workshop, so we can do like another like 20 minutes if that's okay. And I don't know, that's it. I'm gonna be walking around and see like how you guys are doing. Let me know if you have any questions, and again, scan the QR code or go here to see the code. Thank you. Okay. You got it. Let's see what happens. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Okay. The equation. Oh, you want to see the algorithm? Do I have to do that for you? I mean, it's a, how would you guys tackle the issue? How would you approach the program? Yeah, but what if you wanted to recreate it in JavaScript? There's an algorithm. So there's an algorithm. The idea is that you should get the algorithm and then display it maybe as an alert, since that's possible. Or like you could put today's date and then the converter, you know, like just to, it's just a way for you to implement the tools that I just gave you in a more practical way. Because sometimes like it's easier to like see it on the screen, but like the moment you get home, it's like, oh my God, what did I just do? You know, so I don't know. That makes sense. Okay, so I'm gonna be walking around and see how you guys are doing for another like 10-15 minutes.
Did you want us to get an input value too, like from the user?
So that's another problem with JavaScript, that it's not like C++, so there's not like a good like basic standard for like input rather than there is for output. So just put the value into an object, and like you can do var temperature, and then you can say one parameter could be Celsius and the other one Fahrenheit, and then you define the other one by an algorithm depending on which one the user picks. And then next time we could implement that into like a simple basic like HTML page that plugs in the value of the user, and then it converts it by itself. Okay? Okay.
Oh, and then what language are we going to be using that like equivalent to PHP, right?
Thank you. That's such a good question. So the idea of this workshop is that I wanted to show you guys that we could use JavaScript both for backend and front end. Is there anybody who's not like familiar with the idea of front end and backend? Okay, nice. Okay, so whenever you guys see a website, there are actually like two parts of it. There's the one that you see. For instance, I open Google and I plug in something into the search and it gives me a result. And then there's another part that you will never see, and of course Google will never share with you because it's an engine, it's a software, it's a machine that runs inside Google servers that takes that value that you inputted, does his own like algorithm conversion, and then it spits out results. So that part is called backend, the part that you don't see. Front end is the actual part that you see, so like what the user sees. And the idea of this workshop is to show you that you can use both using JavaScript. Okay, you can create both using JavaScript, so it's a standard. Yes.
So sometimes I see some people say they're a full stack developer. Does that mean they can both front end and the back end? Does that what it mean?
Yeah, exactly. So I was talking about this with the two of them. Earlier on, there was a more distinct definition of what a front-end developer is and a back-end developer. But like in this context, yes, the word full-stack developer is actually more proper because it defines somebody that yes knows how to do designing and create a simple HTML page, so something that the user would see, but at the same time knows how to take that and create a machine that computes code out. Meaning that you can have this web page with like Squarespace. You could create this with Squarespace, but I dare you to create a new Google Doc with Squarespace. That is, in my opinion, not possible because what Google Doc is a web application, and what this is a website. So there are some, places in the middle where the two meet together, but Google Doc is more what I am thinking of when I think of like web developing and web application like general.